Good morning, all.
Yeah.
Everything about transformational leadership is premised upon your connection to Jesus. If you're not connected to Jesus, you're not a transformational leader. At least not from my perspective for the people of God. I wanted to share something, and this is, as Pastor Jenkins said, just one of these free things. I'm just going to throw this in for free this morning.
Amen. We like free.
The second chapter of the book of Hebrews, there's a passage there that, as I've thought about it and as I've meditated on it, has literally changed the way I've worshiped and my experience of worship. In the second chapter of the book of Hebrews, of course, the book of Hebrews is about Jesus. From beginning to end, it's about Jesus. Jesus is better than the old covenant. Jesus is better than the law. Jesus is better than Moses. Jesus is higher than the angels. And in the second chapter, the writer of the book of Hebrews talks about Jesus in this way. He says, putting everything under them, God left nothing that is not subject to them. Okay, this is about us and our relationship to Jesus. Yet at this present, we do not see everything subject to them, but we see Jesus was made lower than the angels for a little while, now crowned with glory and honor because he suffered death, so that by the grace of God he might taste death for everyone. In bringing many sons to glory, it was fitting that God, for whom and through whom everything exists, should make the pioneer of their salvation perfect through what he has suffered. The pioneer of our salvation, Jesus. Okay. Both the one who makes people holy and those who are holy are of the same family. So the one who makes us holy is Jesus, and we are of his family. So Jesus is not ashamed to call them brothers, he says, and this is the verse that has changed the way I worship. I will declare your name to my brothers. Jesus is speaking this. I will declare your name to my brothers, and in the assembly I will sing your praises. When God's people get together, Jesus is speaking to us. Personally, he's present with us. And he is singing with us. He's singing with us. Now think about that. Last night, just before Pastor Jenkins preached, as we were singing, I began to think about Jesus singing with us. And it moved my heart. I could no longer I couldn't sing for a while. I just had to stop singing to think about Jesus, the risen Lord, the resurrected, powerful one, the one who reigns in glory, was pleased because we had gathered in his name to come and sing with us. Now, I want to tell you a couple of times that this happened. Now, I served a church that was part of Converge Baptist Conference, and sort of the theme song of the Baptist Conference, is that old Swedish hymn. And you'll know it as soon as I talk about it, and the way we usually sing that hymn, and the way we usually sing a lot of these hymns, is we think about the glory of God and all his greatness, and we're on tiptoes singing, and I began to think about what I would be like if Jesus were there beside us. So things like, this is my story, this is my song, praising my Savior all the day long. Except I think that if I'm actually in the presence of Jesus, I might be down on my face. I might not be on tiptoes shouting, and I might. I'm talking about me, about how I might be relating to the risen, glorified Jesus and how he relates to us and how I want to relate to him.
Yeah.
So that sometimes I'm in the midst of a congregation singing, and again, you can never know people's motives, but I've stopped singing. It's not because I don't like the music. It's not I don't like the message.
Yeah.
But I just suddenly find myself very aware that I'm in the presence of the resurrected, glorified, risen, reigning and ruling Jesus, the Lord of glory. And it takes away my breath. And I can't sing out loud because Jesus is singing with his people. That has just changed my whole approach to the way worship occurs in my life. And so sometimes, we have to dial it back, but always our worship is in conjunction with Jesus.
Yeah.
And I want to say, always our leadership has to be in conjunction with Jesus.
Yeah.
Always our leadership has to be in conjunction with Jesus. When we are out of fellowship with Jesus, when we get out of touch with Jesus, we fall back to that soulish approach we fall back to transactional leadership. We think it's about us and what we want. So that all transformational leadership is governed by, driven by, motivated by, animated by our relationship to Jesus. Now, we can translate that right down. If you're working with a small group, if that's where God has called you to be the leader, you just have a cluster of people. You're in a Sunday school class with children, your effectiveness is directly related to your connection to Jesus. Everything else that flows out in transformational leadership grows out of your connection with Jesus. So if there are these places in our public worship or our private worship where we're singing, and then we realize that Jesus is singing with us, he's declaring the praises of God with us. A funny little thing has happened so when I'm designing worship services, one of the things I ask myself is, could Jesus sing this song with me?
Wow. Whoa.
So I started asking those very deep theological questions. Could Jesus sing this song with me? Would it be honoring to the Father for Jesus to sing this with me?
I want to holler, Doug, I didn't know you had it in you. Yeah.
That has changed the way I relate to worship. It has transformed the way. Okay. I want to. I want to finish up a couple of things I didn't get to yesterday. I want to talk about values, the third part of transformational leadership. So the first part of transformational leadership is what? Mission. Where does mission come from? God only. God is the one who sets our mission. Second stage is vision. And what is vision? It's our fair share of the big mission. Okay? Well, the church exists to advance the mission that God has given to us, to go into all the world so that everyone everywhere hears the good news about Jesus, but no local assembly and no small group of people could accomplish everyone everywhere. And so we are always going through this process of what's the fair share for this particular congregation. So you start immediately at your neighborhood.
Yeah.
That's to love your neighbor as you love yourself. So you start, the church has to first say, this church has to say, we love this neighborhood. So tell me what this neighborhood is. Maybe 5 blocks, 10 blocks, maybe the whole region. Okay, Pastor Jenkins has a big neighborhood.
Yeah.
Okay, but it's still his responsibility is love his neighbors. That's where God has planted him. That's where God has him to do his work. So you start there. So this whole set of our mission starts as global, eternal, but our vision is all local. It's all about our neighbors here and now with this church and this resources and this building and this parking lot that God has given to us to serve this time here and now. It's very honest. Very honest. Now the third part of it is values. We call values the delimitators. And so I'm at the second part, bottom of the page, and if you have the handout from yesterday.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, bottom of the second page from yesterday. So values are normally what we think is what's important to us, what's important to you. And there's a way to talk about values Because when I hear a lot of churches, they have some very fancy values, but when you examine values from this one basis, values are always bought. They cost you something.
Yeah.
Values are always bought. Okay, so let's sort through this a little bit. If values are always bought, purchased, you can track their relative importance by where they show up on the calendar, where they show up in the checkbook. Okay, so let me give you a couple examples. I could say to you, I really value fishing. Okay, that happens to be one of my high values. So you would say, okay, show me your calendar. When's the last time you went fishing? And I'd say, well, it's been a few months. And then you would rightly say to me, well, that's an intention, or that's a good thought, but brother, if you haven't put the line in the water, it's not a value. Okay? Because values are always bought. You can see the tracks of the values. So, so we say, the church has this big banner, some church somewhere says this big banner, we, love the Lord your God with all your heart, love your neighbor as yourself. So you just go and say, okay, show me in your calendar how you are loving your neighbor.
Yeah.
If it doesn't show up there, it's not a value. It's an intention, it's a good thought.
Yeah.
But values always are bought.
Yeah.
And the church over the ages has been filled with good intentions.
Yeah.
Noble things.
Yeah.
Take out your checkbook. Show me the values. I can track your values. Now, I'm not being critical. Providing for your family is a good value, but don't tell me that you love the Lord and love His church and love His work if I can't find any indication in your budget, any indication in your checkbook that you've invested your money in God's work in a substantive, regular way. Come on, you got to clap a little bit. I'm used to Anglo church. When I make a really good point in Anglo church, they raise their eyebrows. So I like it when you give a little bit of feedback to the brother here. There's this wonderful passage in 2 Samuel about David. You remember, he wanted to do a sacrifice. And it came to this, he saw this place he wanted, and the brother said, you're the king, I'll just give you this. You can have the land, you have the sacrifice. And David's response to that was, I will surely buy it from you for a price, nor will I offer burnt offerings to the Lord my God with that which cost me nothing.
Yeah.
Did he value that sacrifice? Did it mean something to him? Yes. Why? Because it cost him. Okay, so mission, vision, and values. You see how values begin to show up. They begin to guide the way in which we operate in our vision. The way our another one. This is the best one. Does the lost world matter to God? Yes. How do you know? God gave His only begotten Son. Okay, so you see how even God lives out this example before us. That which is important cost us. That which is invaluable, if it's a value to the organization, it helps us decide what matters most. So, when we look at the life and ministry of Jesus, it's very obvious that people matter most to Jesus. And so we can get some hierarchy here. We say, people are more important than buildings. Am I saying that this building is an insignificant part of the work of this church? No, not at all. What I'm saying is the people matter more than the building does. And the people matter more than the budget. And the people matter more than the programs. And the people matter most because people matter most to God. And God matters most to us. Then people matter to us. So then, if that's the value, then how will we find that? So what are we doing to invest in the lives of people? We can track that. We can track that in terms of time and money. So Jesus told 3 parables. I love these 3 parables. It's a trilogy, and most of the time they're called the lost sheep, the lost coin, and the lost son, prodigal son. I don't think that's the right titles for those. I think the right titles for those 3 parables is Jesus, they're the found sheep, it's the found coin, and it's the found son. In every one of those cases, think through the way the parables are phrased. What Jesus demonstrates in those is a set of values. He says the person that lost the sheep, what did the shepherd do? He left the 99 and went looking for, did that one sheep matter to the shepherd? Yes. How do you know? He invested his time. You can track that right through. The lost coin, was the lost coin valuable? How do you know? So the woman swept the whole house. She looked in every corner. She looked under every bed, under a piece of furniture. She moved everything around. How do you know it mattered? You could see it in her effort and time. Now, Jesus was not talking about sheep, and he was not talking about coins, and that's why he tells this 3rd parable about the son who was lost. Did the son matter to the father? How do you know? Every day, he went out and looked and waited for his son.
Good.
You see, values, we talk about values, we throw that idea around, oh yeah, this church values this or that, the other thing. But what Jesus demonstrates in his teaching is that values are bought. They cost us something. And if it's not costing us something, don't call it a value. Call it intention, call it a nice idea, but don't call it a primary value of your church. You say, this is a missionary church, we value missions. Well, show it up in your budget. It has to show up somewhere. It has to be there. If it's not there, in time or money, don't call it a value. Say, someday we intend to get around to, hopefully, maybe, we want to. Okay? So it's easy for us to throw out this idea of mission, vision, values. Say. When you start to unwrap this idea of values, you can see how it really begins to drive your ministry in real practical ways. And it gives you a very simple way to check and make sure that you are actually doing what you say is important to the ministry. We believe that these things are important. We believe that God has called us to that. Well, then you will find the tracks of that very plainly written through the life of the congregation. Let me pause there and let me ask questions. Do you have any questions or comments about that? Yeah. All right, so pull out the second study sheet for this morning. I want to talk about how this idea of the compelling vision comes about. And now I get back to this whole question of our connection to Jesus is the basic point of a living vision for the people of God. So the process for developing a compelling vision starts with taking some time to get matters straight between you and Jesus. Get something right between you and Jesus. No substantive, valuable vision statement for the people of God can happen without deep and substantive connection to Jesus. It's easy to say, but that's a challenge in this 21st century. I mean, we have elevator music. Has Christmas music started in the mall yet? So it's just kind of this background noise of life. Is very difficult for us in the 21st century to get these quiet moments where we actually substantively connect to Jesus. Let's just be honest. I'm not talking about something that's fluffy and easy. If it was fluffy and easy, anybody could do it. I'm talking about the substance of the vision for the people of God. It takes a very deep intention to stay connected to Jesus, to find times and places. As a dean and now as working as a director for the seminary, I can't tell you the number of times when I've consulted with a pastor, and the pastor would say, I've got this problem, what shall I do? And I'd say, I don't know. But I know how you can find it. And I'd say, take a spiritual retreat.
Yeah.
Get out of town. Take your Bible. Don't take anything else but your Bible and your notebook. Leave your cell phone and your computer at home. Get away where it's quiet, where you can pray and listen to Jesus speak to you. It's so hard in our 21st century. Now, so we all say, I mean, you're all nodding and say, get connected with Jesus is really important. You're all saying that. Okay, take out your calendar. Is it a value or is it not a value? Okay? If it's not a value, if it's a value, it's going to show up in your calendar. When is your quiet time? When are your spiritual retreats? When are you listening to Jesus? If it's not there, you're just talking about, you're just puffing. You're just talking about intentions. And you know the road to hell is paved with good intentions. It helps us when we do these moments to reorient, like, he's the Lord and I'm not. I mean, he is the Lord. And I either acknowledge that, and you can see that I acknowledge that by my personal quiet time, my prayer time, but these times when we intentionally grapple with. I love the story of the Old Testament of the wrestling match that Jacob has at Bethel. Okay? And remember, he holds on. I won't let go of you until you bless me. That's such a powerful image when I'm talking about a spiritual retreat, a spiritual time away, time of quiet, time of silence, away from the regular rigmarole of life, so that you can hear. Because sometimes God whispers. That still small voice. And if your life is filled with background noise, and if all the music is still going on from all the places, you get the earbuds in, and you got all the stuff going on, the television's on, and the kids are yelling for your attention, and your boss is after you. So someplace is going to say, stop, I need to have a word from the Lord. I need to listen. There's a real specific approach then, and that is to begin to look around and see what Jesus is doing in the people around you. We were talking before breakfast here about Blackaby's idea of find where God is working and join him in that. I have a corollary to that. Find the people in whom God is working and fellowship with them. Good. Find the people God are working in and join them. Rub elbows with them. Affirm them. Listen to them. Ask them what Jesus is saying to them. Jesus has never left himself without a witness. That's right. He has always been speaking to his people. He has always been testifying to the world. And so you find where he's working and find whom he's working with and through and join them. And then specifically ask Jesus, what do you want me to do? I think that our zeal for prayer lists and prayer guides have gotten this upside down. Do you ever think of your prayer? I think a lot of times we look at our prayer list, we have all these things on our prayer list, this. It's almost like Jesus is Santa Claus. And we come to say, Jesus, I want you to fix my budget, I want to fix the car, I want to fix my kids. Jesus, I want you to make my wife healthy. We have all these things we tell him what we want him to do. Do you ever think you ought to stop and say, Jesus, what is it you want me to do? Lord Jesus, I'll wait. I need a word from you. You just tell me what to do. I don't know what to do until you tell me. I'm the Lord. You're the Lord. I'm the follower. You're the boss. I work for you. I need you to reorient my schedule. I need you to open my eyes. I need you to show me the pathway that I should be walking. Lord, you know all the needs I have. You take this list and we get this list, and Lord, I want you to pray for. I'm praying for this and this and this, as if he didn't already know, as if the Lord wasn't already aware of all of those things. And we rarely, if ever, do we stand open-handed and say, Lord, I got nothing. I got nothing. Until you tell me, Lord, I'm just going to wait here. I'm not going to let go of you until you bless me, until you give me some direction. So if you're in a pastoral role, you say to Jesus, I'm not going to let go of you till you give me some insight about where you want this congregation to go, what you want it to do. I got some ideas, but you're the Lord and I'm just working for you. But then the way in which that reflects down through. So once the pastor has an idea of what God is calling the congregation to do, then every single part of the congregation begins to reflect that same sense of vision. I can pick on Pastor Jenkins because I know what's going on there, but his vision is to make disciples. And I know because I've done this. I walk into a group anywhere in the church and I say, well, why does this church exist? Make disciples. How are you doing that? And I'd say about 95% of the time they know this is why we do what we do. Wow. We do what we do because we're called in this community to make disciples. So that's the way the pastor is the vision caster because he's been earnestly seeking after Jesus' direction for the church. Then every other part of the church begins to seek after that same reflection of that same vision. Now, it looks different. So the kiddies, that they disciple differently than the married couples classes. The missionaries go at it differently than the high school class. They each have a little nuance, but if you put it all together, you'd see they all line up. They all line up with the same sense of vision for this church, in this place, at this time, with this people. This is why God has put us together. So when they start to align, so you have the vision and the values, and then the operation. In that overlap of those three circles, there's the sweet spot for God's work. Okay? Yeah, so let's be honest. So sometimes, the vision is one way and the values are another way, but when they begin to align and then come to be operationalized, and so everyone that is a sub-leader, okay, they're the ones that begin to operationalize this sense of values and vision for the church. Okay, so everybody's in the same place. So we walk in and I've, of course, done this. I've consulted with churches, and I walk in. One of the first people I talk to in a church, you're going to laugh, is the janitor. First person I talk to is janitor. Okay, why are you doing what you do? And in places where there's a healthy church, the janitor says, I'm here to serve and knows the vision. And I know that pastor has been working on that vision so it gets to the fringes of the congregation. Now, because I know that those of you that work in kiddie ministry with little children, sometimes it's really hard to understand how, blowing noses and wiping butts, how that relates to this mission that God has given us in this world. Okay? But it does. If you're serving the children and you're having a chance to disciple them, you set them on a course that will change the world, perhaps. So every single person in the church that is in a place of service and ministry has to be working out of that same sense of vision for the church. So that every single person, so the janitor, the kiddie workers, the nursery workers, the choir, the music directors, the Sunday school teachers, the home Bible study leaders, the mission work, the people that cook, they all have a sense that they are working on the same vision for the same reasons out of the same set of values. So this compelling vision starts with getting things straight between you and Jesus. It grows by asking yourself, what am I passionate about? So I'm speaking out particularly to those of you in positions of leadership. What burns in my heart relative to the kingdom of God? It has this sense of dreaming. What could God do here? What does God desire to do? God, who is the creator of the universe, does not think in small terms. He thinks in big terms. Now, can you see it happening easily? If you're working a vision statement, and can you see that vision happening easily? Then it's too small. It's too small. Because vision calls us to accomplish great things for God. If you can say this, we can do this. The time the church says we can do this is the time they begin to decline. The time they move from their spiritual people to their soulish people, because they think, in my strength, I can get this done.
That's good, man. You've been listening.
I'm trying to listen. Okay? But when we are working for the King of Kings, Lord of Lords, and we know that we're serving a mission that says everybody, everywhere, praising and honoring the King of Kings, Lord of Lords.
Yeah, yeah.
And we know there's just no way we can do that by ourselves.
Right.
But we have this call, this compelling, this passion, this burning in our pit of our guts.
Yeah.
We've got to do this. And we can't do it unless Jesus shows up.
Yeah, yeah.
Now you're on to what a vision statement's about.
Yeah.
See? It calls people to something bigger than themselves. Can you do it without help or faith? Maybe there's too much of you and not enough Jesus in that vision statement. Okay. Let's drive this down. There's a couple examples. Let's drive this down to the nursery. If we're talking about blowing noses and wiping butts in the nursery, that is not a vision. That's a job. That's just not nothing. But if you're talking about loving on kids so that they discover the love of Jesus.
Yeah.
Okay. If you're talking about shaping their heart and their mind so they become fully committed followers of Jesus, that changes everything about what you're doing there. You still do some of the same tasks. Don't get me wrong. I mean, kids need to have their nose blown. I get that. But the motivation and the power and the desire to care for those children, love on them, and see them come to faith in Jesus and become fully committed followers of Jesus, that changes everything about what you're doing there in that nursery.
Yeah.
So that's what drives this. And so I like to put it this way: does it take away your breath to think what Jesus could do? Then maybe you might be moving in a visionary way. Could Jesus do something big in Aurora? Yeah, he could. Now that's something that makes a vision exciting and powerful and transformative. If you think you can get it done by your own efforts, well, if Jesus doesn't have to show up, it's not transformative. It's soulish, it's selfish, and it's ultimately not going to be worth anybody getting involved with. It's about the money, it's about the prestige, it's about the power that you get, but it's not about Jesus. Third thing is to actually assess the congregation that you're working with, and or this is also a ministry. If you're involved with a ministry, who's there? Who has God entrusted to your care? So this matter of being the shepherd, the pastor is the under shepherd under Jesus, and then all of us that fit within this structure, whatever ministry position we hold, whether a deacon or whether it's a minister or whether it's just a worker in one of the programs, all of us have the same kind of reflection that we have to say, who's here? And what do these three brothers or these three sisters, what can they do? How has God gifted them? How can I work to set free their gifts to advance this mission and this ministry that God has entrusted to us? It's a pastor looking at the gift mix of this congregation, saying, in this congregation, we seem to have, so in this congregation, you seem to have musicians. I would guess that part of your vision would say, since God has gifted us with musicians, some of the way in which your vision rolls out will follow the pathway of music. I'm not Jesus, and I'm not saying that's the way, but it would say that's an example of how you would. So I had a congregation that was gifted with teachers. I had some brilliant teachers, and so my congregation rolled out in terms of education. We had strong Sunday school classes. We had strong Bible study groups. When I taught on Wednesday night, I'd have 40 or 50 people show up for Wednesday night Bible studies. Okay, but that was our gift. That may not be your gift. That just happened to be the gift mix of that congregation at that particular time. So when you're doing some honest assessment, who God gave me, and what's their giftedness, and what can they do, and how are they motivated to do this, that gives you some hints about the way in which your vision gets shifted and changed to you. Land in that sweet spot where God is using the vision to animate and move, and then also concentrate in the best ways the people that God has given to you. So we keep asking ourselves, what would happen if God showed up and motivated the people in this way? Would our vision be honoring to Jesus? So again, everything, I started off by talking about when Jesus shows up for our worship, it changes the way I worship. Yeah. When Jesus shows up in your leadership, it changes the way you lead.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's whether you're at a low level in involvement with the congregation or a high level, doesn't matter. It's about your connection to Jesus.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Fourth, write it down in real simple terms. I look at vision statements. Working with students, student pastors. I'll tell you, I've seen vision statements that were a page long. Okay, and I looked at that and go, oh my goodness, what is this about? I think I'm a relatively educated, bright person, and I think, what is it you want these people to do, and when do you want them to? This is very, and I keep it simple. One of my deacons, he was a carpenter, a finished tradesman carpenter, a fine carpenter. Precision, cabinetry. He was exquisite in his work. And he would say to me, Pastor, when I'm in the room, would you keep the cookies on the low shelf? And by that he was, don't soar with these big theological ideas. Just tell me simply. Tell me straightforward. Just keep the cookies like we do for our kids and grandkids. We keep the cookies on the low shelf
Good metaphor.
where they can find them. Keep the good stuff down here where I can understand it.
That's good.
No, he was a brilliant carpenter.
Yeah.
But he's telling me that all the time. Pastor, keep the cookies on the low shelf.
That's good.
So keep the vision needs to be simple, but it needs to lead directly to planning and goal setting.
Yeah.
All right. So visions that don't lead directly to planning and goal setting ultimately get ignored. Okay, because they're not practical. They don't show ways and pathways for the congregation to get involved. So every goal has to be honestly and regularly evaluated. Are we doing what we say we're doing? So how would you know if you're let me pick on Jenkins again here. His vision is to make disciples. How would you know that's happening at the sixth graders? How would you know that? So you say, okay, well, how would we evaluate whether the sixth graders are being discipled? Okay, so we could say the evaluation is we've told them. Is that a good evaluation? No, it's not a good evaluation. But the church we've been good about doing that. That's been the level of our evaluation. We assume that if the preacher has preached, the people have heard. Is that true, brother? That's not true. It is not true. What's the statistics on adult learners? 8% of what you hear. Only 8% of what you hear do you remember and put into practice. So now we would say these sixth graders, have they heard? Have they affirmed? Said, yes, I believe in Jesus? Have they practiced? Have they gone? You can then measure each and every part of the congregation. And when it comes to your vision statement, brothers and sisters, we have to be ruthless and kind, but ruthless in our pursuit of the truth if we're to be everything that God wants us to be. It is just too important. So you say to me, do you love your neighbors? My next door neighbor on the other side was an elderly woman. And one day I was pushing the fertilizer spreader on my side of the yard, and she came out. We were talking as we did across the front yard there, and she goes, it is so expensive for me to get the lawn service. She goes, It's $100 a time for me to get the lawn service come in and do fertilizing and all this. I said, Florence, would you like me when I buy my thing of fertilizer, if I buy a thing of fertilizer? She goes, well, what would you charge? I said, Florence, I would never charge my neighbor to run the fertilizer in her yard. She goes, really? I said, yeah. I said, if you want, you can buy the fertilizer. I'll give you the bill. I said, twice a year I buy a bag of fertilizers. It's about $50. I buy it at Lowe's. Would you like me to buy a bag for you? She says, would you do that? And so for about 8 or 9 years, I fertilized my yard twice a year, and I fertilized Flo's yard twice a year. And she paid me the $50 or whatever it was for the bag of fertilizer. Okay, do I love my neighbor? Well, she thought so. Okay, so you go ask, go check it. When I was talking about, in my own life, when I said, do I love my neighbors? So it started with, do I know their names? Do I know who they are? My backdoor neighbor, Frank, and his wife he was a barber. He was right off the boat from Italy. I mean, he was right off the boat from Italy. I mean, right in your face kind of guy. So I decided, if he's a barber and he's my neighbor, I needed to get my hair cut there. He was not a particularly great barber, by the way. When I got home, I usually had to cut a couple of places and trim it up so it all looked the way I wanted it to look. He can never quite get that right. And he always cut it shorter than I wanted to. Yeah. But man, we got to talk about all kinds of things. For 10 years, Frank was my barber when I lived there. Yeah. Why? Not because he was a great barber, but he was my neighbor. Yeah, it's good. And one day he said, "What do you do anyway? What do you do anyway?" Well, I teach Christian leaders. Oh, that makes a lot of sense. He says, in all these years that I've cut your hair, I've never heard you curse, ever. Oh, he says, that makes sense. I see something about you, We were backdoor neighbors, okay? So it's measurable, okay? So if I went to your neighbors and said, do you think this neighbor is loving on you? I mean, they'd be able to count, and they could see the calendar, and they could see the dollars, or they could see the Grandma Hardy apple pie, okay? So we have to be ruthless about this, but fair and kind. Because we have an approach to ministry that is developmental. Let me unpack that a little bit. Jesus took me right where he found me, a mess. Okay? If you evaluated me according to the vision then, I was an F failure. Okay? But I was headed in the right direction. Okay? And so we grant each other the right to develop in Jesus' timing and care. Even as we hold each other ruthlessly accountable that this is what we said we would do. And we say, well, we didn't hit it there, but what can we do? What will change to help us do what God has called us to do? And so this matter, these are not inconsequential for vision setting. It's the only way the congregation knows that they really are doing what they think God has called them to do. Okay? Unless you take the time to measure it, and take time to evaluate it, take time to say, is this actually really happening? You don't know whether or not you're rolling out the vision the way God has called you to roll out the vision. Okay? So this is a product of leadership. It's always about the leader. So the central task for leaders in the kingdom of God is to enable people to hear and to understand and commit to this core value. So somebody asked about a question about, can a pastor relinquish the responsibility to train and motivate his people to someone else? No. But it may not be that a pastor trains and motivates all the people in his congregation, but the circle of leaders that are the critical leaders, that is the pastor's responsibility to make sure they are trained and motivated and deployed to the right place at the right time, doing the right things for the right reasons. That is the responsibility of the pastor. Pastor can never give up that circle of people that are the primary influences of the congregation. And each of those people have a sphere of influence, and they have to make sure that everybody in their sphere of influence is doing the right thing for the right reason at the right time in the right amount to give God glory. Okay? So the pastor may relinquish some of the training and motivation and deployment of his congregation, but the central core always belongs to the pastor. The pastor can never give up that responsibility of training and motivating his leaders to lead well. And as soon as that happens, as soon as there's a gap between the pastor and his core leaders, that church is not healthy anymore. Yeah. That church it's just a matter of time before the wheels are going to fall off the wagon. Yeah. Yeah. We can predict that with great precision. We can chart the time when something happens where the leaders and the pastor no longer fellowship with each other. And it's just a matter of time before there's problems in the congregation. The congregation lurches towards unhealthiness. So that clarity that comes when the pastor is vision casting and responsible for the primary leading and motivating and training of his core leaders, that is the core responsibility. Now let's drop it down to if you're in charge of the elementary students ministry, okay, you are responsible to make sure that each and every person that works in the elementary children's ministry is properly trained and motivated and deployed. And if you're the building maintenance program director, it's your responsibility that every single person in the building maintenance program is properly trained and motivated and deployed. So it reflects right down and through the organization. But all the training and motivation and deployment are all guided by what? The mission and the vision. Okay? So we can say at any time, it is your work advancing God's work in this world. Okay? All right. Last thing about this section. The pastor has a primary responsibility, as every other ministry leader does within the church, to actually live out the vision in a day-to-day basis. The pastor can never say, do as I say. The congregation will always do what the pastor does. And you think, well, that's a lot of pressure, and I get that's a lot of pressure on pastors and leaders. But let's just say, there it is. That is a truth, a spiritual truth. The history of Israel, look at the history of Israel. The spiritual vitality of the people of God rose or fell based on the vitality and spiritual life of the leader. Those times when there's malaise within Israel, ask who's leading, how are they leading? And you'll see that there's a person that's compromised. They've chased after the false gods. They're no longer passionate about God. And what happens to the whole nation of Israel? Spiritual life declines. So, I mean, this is not a trick. It is hard. It's not a trick. That the leadership of an organization, the spiritual health and vitality, is clearly attached to the spiritual vitality of the leader. Now, those of you that are pastors, you don't have to listen to this part. Those of you that are in places of influence where you can care for your pastor, understand how a congregation can help their pastor succeed as a spiritual leader. Pastors need Sabbaths. I can tell you that how bad pastors are of observing their Sabbaths. I'm not talking to these men. I'm not going to speak to them. I don't want to be accusing of them. I'm just telling you, I've observed. In the last decade, I've been with hundreds of pastors, literally, and I've asked scores and scores of pastors, tell me about your Sabbath. And you know what the common response is? Looking at their shoes, hoping I'd go away. So those of you that are in places of influence can encourage and help your spiritual leaders to make sure they have the times of refreshment where they can listen to Jesus. And that you should have Sabbath. Yeah. You know that Sabbath is the one principle throughout the Scripture outside of grace and salvation through Jesus alone. But it's the one principle that is in every aspect of the Scriptures. On the seventh day in the Genesis count, God ceased from his work and rested. In the covenant, honor the Sabbath day and keep it holy. In the Psalms, you'll find the call to Sabbath. In the latter prophets, the former prophets and latter prophets, the prophets rail against Israel for abusing the Sabbath. Jesus says, man was not made for the Sabbath. Sabbath was made for man. In Revelation, when we all get home, what will we get? A Sabbath rest. There is, for the people of God, a Sabbath rest. What is that? That's when we get home with Jesus in heaven. That's a Sabbath. Every single part of the Scripture. Trace it for yourself. You will find the Sabbath is all through there. I believe that honoring Sabbath and spiritual leadership are tied together in healthy churches. And unhealthy churches, it starts with that, because what happens? When you don't honor Sabbath, you flip back over to the soulish side and think, I can do this myself. And so we suck it up and we work the 12-hour days. We work the 7 days a week. We don't take a break. What suffers? Our health suffers. Our family suffers. Okay? Our spiritual life suffers. And when our spiritual life suffers, our ministry suffers. When our ministry suffers, the people that God has given to us to nourish in the Spirit, they suffer. Now, I'm not saying that everybody that takes a Sabbath is automatically a good, healthy leader, but I'm saying there's a high correlation. A high correlation between pastors and Christian leaders that honor their Sabbaths. Now, we know that the new covenant does not require Sabbath like the old covenant did. You know, they stoned people that broke the covenant of the Sabbath in the old covenant. They were real serious about keeping the laws. You know, we've been set free from keeping the laws. Jesus is the law keeper. He has satisfied all the laws for us. Doesn't change the fact that God did not make us to work 7 days a week in a row. God created us with the need to stop and to rest and to listen and to do good. Now, Jesus adds that third part, okay, to do good on the Sabbath. But it has to grow out of rest and worship and listening to God. Now, those are the preaching pastors. I know Pastor Jenkins does not get a Sabbath on Sunday. He preaches multiple services. I've seen him drag out of that last service like he's a whipped pup. Am I right? Am I right? Absolutely exhausted from preaching. Okay? So Sunday is not a Sabbath for those who are engaged in the work. But in the Old Testament, what provisions? So God made provisions for the priests who had to serve in the tabernacle and in the temple. They had other provisions to take care of them when they had to serve the people of God on those days of celebration and worship. There were other times. And so if you're involved with ministry on Sunday, I get that. Do it unto the Lord, but then make sure that you have times of refreshment, times of rest, times alone with Jesus. I have yet to find, and I suppose in this big world that we live in, I've yet to find a pastor who failed because their theology was inadequate. I've yet to, find one because their work in administration was terrible. I've had all kinds of pastors fail because they burned out, because they hit the wall, because they got discouraged. And deeply, I believe that they ignored these times of refreshment that God calls us to in terms of Sabbath. Let's see. I want to make one last statement about this, then we're going to stop and let you ask some questions. I want to say this brutally, honestly, that you can only lead people who are willing to be led.
Yeah.
Now, how do we know? Well, Jesus used this parable. He says, when the guy goes out, the farmer goes out and he sows his seed, and what comes up is both good stuff and weeds. And he puts it in the context of the harvest. And harvest in the New Testament is almost always about the final judgment. It's about when Jesus returns. And he says, here's this poor farmer. He's put good seed, the seed of the gospel, into his field. It's growing, but the weeds have grown up. And he can't pull the weeds up, because if he pulls the weeds up, he pull the good stuff out with them. And so every congregation has weeds. And they are very discouraging. Weed whackers, yeah. So this is the reality of leading, is that we lead with this struggle between godly people and less than godly people. Okay? We don't stop doing what God has called us to do, casting a compelling vision, training and motivating, sharing the truth and the power of the gospel, because we do so out of our vision for ministry is developmental. But it's real that we have, and you know, some of the sheep bite. Some of the sheep bite. We have this image. Here we use shepherding as this powerful. Are there any shepherds here? Any of you ever seen a sheep live and up close? Okay, but not in a ranch setting. We know so little about this metaphor of shepherding. Sheep are smelly. Sheep are rather dumb. Why? They need a leader. Jesus looked at the crowds and had compassion because they were helpless and harassed, like sheep without a shepherd. Okay, so these are the hard sides of our ministry reality. So I don't want to give the impression that, boy, you just get your vision statement made and you got it going here. It's just not true. Let me quote what I said yesterday: "To live above with the saints we love, oh, that will be glory. To live below with the saints we know is an entirely different story." All right, let me pause and let you ask questions about this model. I got about 6 more hours worth of material, but I need to stop now because I get Pastor Jenkins has got some good things to share with you today. And yes, question.
Throughout the years, but the rest of me was out of balance. There was no balance in my soul and my body. So how can we make sure that we build a whole man and not just hone in on the spiritual wholeness?
Right, very good question. So first of all, when I talk about Sabbath, I'll talk about just Sabbath principles: the need for rest, renewal, refreshment, a word from the Lord, apart from preaching and teaching ministry that a pastor or leader has.
Right.
Okay? Good. So every pastor needs to have it. Is it? I mean, in my ministry, it was Monday. Okay, Monday. You know what I did on Monday? When we got up and got our kids out to school, my wife and I would go down to a little corner restaurant, and we would sit and drink coffee. 2 eggs over easy, 2 slices of toast, two pads of butter, and 2 jellies. And coffee. And we would just talk, and we didn't do anything. We had no agenda, and it was a woven into my week that I did not start ministry till Tuesday morning. Monday, and pastors sacrifice a whole lot of things to have the church. We sacrifice holidays. And so I found it absolutely necessary for me to have that break. So for me, Sabbath is a Sabbath principle because we're under the new covenant. It's not the law of the old covenant. We're under the new covenant. But the principle is still, you need to rest. You need to have a word from the Lord. You need to get away from the duties that you have, totally away from the duties that you have, so you gain perspective, so that you get kind of refreshed. That's vitally important. Okay. The second question. Oh, the.
Making sure we build the
Oh,
whole man,
okay.
not just the spiritual.
Well, you're talking about a value. You're talking about a value. So you say in our ministry, we have a value that we address the whole person in every dimension. Okay, how would you measure that? Well, are we feeding people? Are we clothing people? Are we providing houses for people? Are we creating fellowship opportunities? Are we really dealing with the whole person? Or are we just dealing with this one little slice of things? So you're talking about a value. It's a great value clarification. So you start with the value. We value the whole person. Then you go down to the goals, and you list out of that value a series of goals. And you can hold yourself accountable to that. Are we really dealing with the whole person here? Yes.
I'm going to make a comment on a couple of things you said earlier. One, in terms of the Sabbath and taking the time to rest and our time even to prepare. We live life day by day, and to me, to wait 5 or 6, 7 days to take a time to rest. An old preacher told me when I was young and thought I could do everything all the time. And he said every day he took time out to rest.
Yes.
Not once a week, but every day.
Yes.
He
Yes.
said 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I'm going to take a nap, and I'll see you a couple hours from now.
Yes.
I thought the old man was out of his mind. I said, you're messing up the whole day. It took me a little time till I got to be the old man. I understand that. And what really is so valuable to me, I discovered I get more work done
Yes.
when I stop to rest
Yeah.
and allow my mind to relax. And to the young lady who was talking a moment ago about that spiritual and the physical, your spiritual cannot live by itself.
Yeah.
It lives inside of your physical self.
Yeah.
So you take care of the physical house in order that the spiritual can have peace.
Yeah.
Your spirit is irritated if your body's messed up.
That's a good word.
I'm wearing some beautiful shoes now because I disobeyed what I just told you. I got gout.
Yeah.
Didn't get it because what I was eating, it was already in my system. I knew better. But I had on some good-looking shoes that I was proud about, and I walked 4 blocks. And I ended up, my feet all messed up.
Yeah.
And then I still wanted to put on that hard shoe. And then finally the Lord said, now you better act like you got some sense. I had to go to Cleveland to preach. I bought me some brand new house shoes.
Yeah.
And I preached the whole week in the house shoes. But you have to learn, you have to take care of your body.
Yeah.
If you're going to do any spiritual good.
That's right.
And some of us just believe that we are so, my son just said invincible.
Yeah,
We think the world won't function
Yeah.
if we're not turning knobs. That's not true. You can die tomorrow. We're going to keep right on going. Senator Udall thought that, this state wouldn't run without him being senator. He lost last night. That new fella that took his job is going to keep on trucking. You need to know how valuable you are to God.
That's good.
You're so important to God that you need to do what he did.
Yeah.
If the creator of the universe had enough sense to say, it's time to rest,
Yeah.
common sense ought to tell us we're not as good as he is.
That's a good word. That's a good word. Which goes to prove that common sense ain't so common. Yes, Edward.
In marathon training, one phase of your training is tapering off just before your marathon. For about the last 5 years, you've been less and less intense and less miles.
Yeah.
So your body builds up after all that training you've done. And you get maximum performance
Right.
in the marathon.
Right. So using the race metaphor, many pastors and Christian leaders assume they are in a sprint, but we're in a marathon. We're in a long-term race. And to think of our life in ministry in terms of sprint, I mean, it was go like crazy, 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 without taking the time to pause. Yes, question?
You know, I realized at a certain point that I was about to hit a wall because I was drained dry. And when I stepped down, you know, I think it's not just a Sabbath, it's a sabbatical.
Yeah, sabbatical is another response, yeah. Vacation with your kids, take your family away, get away where you're just together. Those are great strategies, yeah. Hey, God's blessings to you. I hope this has been helpful. And